Connections, small office switch architecture. By the time we're done here, you will design switch connections and understand critical features in a small office environment. Well, at this point in your networking journey, it's time to take the leap from physical to logical. And in a way that makes me sad because I love the physical. I love cabling. I love getting things looking great and all the connectivity that goes along with it. But as you move from the cabling world into switch configurations and switch design and all that, it becomes amazingly cumbersome to try and draw things like that into a network diagram to show how things are connected. So this environment right here in all of its cabling glory would be represented by something that looks like that. In our rack, we had two switches, one at the top and one at the bottom. This right here is a switch icon. Anytime you see that in a network diagram, you can envision that behind the scene there's something that looks like this, making it all work. Likewise, we don't draw the 24 ports actually plugging into the switch. We might just draw a couple computers to represent, we've got some device connections coming into that switch. So oftentimes you might see a small office network represented like this. We've got our switch right there. The patch panel isn't even shown. Devices are plugged into it, and it connects up here to a router, which is what brings in that internet connection. Depending on the perspective of the network diagram, you may run into some that don't even show the switch. I've often drawn network diagrams that look like this. Got my router, and then I just draw a line that represents all of the connections coming into that router. My focus in a diagram like this would probably be the internet connection. So you can assume there's a lot represented in that line. Cabling, patch panels, switching, they're all there and very relevant. They're just not the focus of this diagram. Now you might be thinking, if a switch can be represented by a line, does that mean it doesn't really do much? Oh my goodness, no. If I were to go to CBT Nuggets website and pull all of the switch training, I would probably be able to assemble hundreds of hours of training on all of the capabilities and features of a switch. But you've got to be able to boil something down to its core function. So if I were to walk up to that happy looking switch there and say, "Switch, what do you do?" He would likely respond, "I facilitate and distribute communication to the devices that need it." Meaning, when all of these different devices plug into a switch, it will facilitate their communication. Now, I know some of you have been looking at this going, is that an Xbox? Of course it is. And if you were to bring up Halo on both of those Xboxes, the game has a function that allows you to link multiple Xboxes together so you can shoot your friend. So the very first thing it sends out is actually a broadcast. That's the Xbox saying, "Hello, is there any other Xboxes out there?" Now the switch gets it, and since it is a broadcast message, it actually sends it out every single one of the ports. Now this computer gets it, and he's like, "Well, I'm not an Xbox. I'm not going to respond to that." So it just drops the packet. This guy gets it, and he goes, "Oh, that's me." And he sends direct communication back. That's known as a unicast message. Now stop right there. How does he do that? I mean, it's not like it has a CV and it goes,
"This is Xbox 2 to Xbox 1. Please come in."
and the switch definitely wouldn't understand that. Instead, every single network device, that Xbox, that computer, your smartphone, your tablet, your Roku television, and anything else that connects to the network comes equipped with a MAC address. It's not an IP address. It's a 12-character hexadecimal address. That just means you can use A through F as valid characters too. That is burned into the network card or the wireless card of the device plugging into the network. When the Xbox sent a broadcast to find any other Xboxes out there, he actually sent it to a MAC address of all Fs, which when the switch sees that, it goes, "Oh, that's a broadcast. I'm going to send that everywhere." But that was just the destination. It also had a source MAC address. That's the one burned into the network card of the Xbox. So when the switch saw that come in, it goes, "Okay, well, I'm going to send that everywhere, but now I just became a little bit smarter. I know that the source MAC address 0011ABCF, etc., is actually plugged into, let's just say, port number 5, and it remembers that." Now, when that Xbox got the broadcast and said, "Oh, that's me," and sent a message, he sent it directly back to that MAC address. So now when the switch gets it, he goes, "Oh, well, matter of fact, I just found out where that guy was myself. I'm going to send it directly to that Xbox." And now that computer doesn't need to worry about getting communication that's not for him. That's why I say the switch facilitates and distributes communication to the devices that need it. So with that knowledge under your belt, let's get back to the key piece of information that you will need to design a small office network. We've got two switches right here connecting to a whole bunch of devices. In order for those devices to talk, and they need to, we have to connect these two switches together. Now you might be thinking, isn't it as simple as taking a cable from here and plugging it down to there? Just like I did right there. And the answer is yes, but what if that cable gets unplugged? What if one of the ports that it's plugged into goes bad? What if somebody's cleaning up the cabling and this is actually twisted left and right and up and down inside of there, and while they're pulling it out, it causes damage to that internal wire? If any of those things happen, our switch network gets severed in half again because the connection goes down. And that could be devastating because half of your devices can no longer communicate. So I'm trying to read your mind right now. You're probably thinking, well, okay, if one cable is not enough, can we just do that and connect two cables? And I would say absolutely yes, that's a great idea. Other than the fact that it could cause your entire network to explode. See, here's the problem. Remember what I said with the Xboxes? Computers and Xboxes and everything else sends broadcast messages. Remember what a switch does with a broadcast? It sends it out all ports. So that means this switch would receive that and cycle that right back around there and cycle that back right around there. And that would come up and cycle back around here and cycle right around here. That's actually known as a broadcast storm. The end result is it's likely going to take down your entire network because it starts looping around so fast that the processor on the switch and all the devices plugged into that switch pegs out at 100% and all the normal functions don't work. This is a really bad day in the office where everything goes down. Now, thankfully, very brilliant people saw this coming and created two different options to connect switches in this kind of environment: spanning tree or link aggregation, also known as Ether channel. The whole purpose of spanning tree is to detect loops like this in the system and stop it. The way it does that is every one of these switches send these little packets known as BPDUs. If you're an acronym junkie, you'd probably want to know that stands for Bridge Protocol Data Unit, but no one will ask you that. So these BPDUs go out once every 2 seconds, and they are sent out every single one of the ports. So it comes down here and goes to every single one of these devices who just ignore it. But it then comes back up here, and this switch goes, whoa, wait a sec. I just got my BPDU packet back. Because inside of that BPDU, it's like a little envelope, is the identity of that switch. So when it sees its own identity being sent back, it goes, oh, there's a loop in the network. I sent it out that port, and it came back in that port. So what Spanning Tree does is disable one of those connections. Now it continues to send those BPDUs once every 2 seconds. So if it ever sees something bad happen to this connection, it goes, oh no, man down, and it unblocks that other link. That way you get the redundancy in place without the risk of a broadcast storm. On almost every real switch, and when I say real, I mean name brand. Things like Cisco, Juniper, Extreme, HP, Unify, and I'll start writing really small Netgear and even smaller D-Link and everything else underneath that. Now, I'm not saying that those guys don't have spanning tree, but I'm not saying that they do. The cheaper the switch is, the less chance it's considered a managed switch, which means you and I can get in and configure it. And chances are pretty good if you can't configure it, it won't have spanning tree, and doing something like this will take down the entire network. Now, someone else looked at this situation and they said, you know what? This is cool. Spanning tree keeps our network from going down, but wouldn't it be even awesomer if instead of blocking that guy, we could bundle him, meaning combine the bandwidth of those two links together, but add enough intelligence that they act as one connection. If a broadcast comes down, we're not going to have that same issue where it loops back around. Now, in some parts of the world, they call that ling aggregation. But in 98.9% of the rest of the world, it's actually called link aggregation because only 1% of the people would spell it wrong. Link aggregation is a technology that actually goes through switches. There's even servers that you can take multiple links together and bundle them up. There's all kinds of devices that support it. And its goal is to deliver more bandwidth to that device. Truth be told, with link aggregation and also Ether channel, Ether channel is just Cisco's name for it, and since Cisco is so massive in the networking space, you'll hear that word just as common. Those two technologies, which really are the same thing, can bundle up to 8 links into a single circuit. And that's pretty awesome Because think about this as well. If you've got 48 computers up here and 48 computers down here, and every single one of them has a 1 gigabit per second connection, then they could easily overrun one of those links and cause it to be a bottleneck if there was a lot of communication going between the two switches. So link aggregation and Ether channel give us not only redundancy, but more bandwidth. So understanding the functions of spanning tree and link aggregation is critical when you've got enough ports to push you beyond a single switch in the wiring closet. Now, one thing you may find happen over time is little switches like this start showing up in people's cubicles. They might be looking to add a few more ports for a couple desktop devices they have there, or maybe an IP phone, or even laptops, because often wired connections are going to be more reliable than wireless. Now, where do these fit into the switch design model? Hey, I've got a ticket here that you've got some network connectivity challenge. What is that? No. Okay, that may have been a little overdramatic, but I'm telling you, small switches are evil. They have caused me more problems in my life of IT than almost anything else that I can remember. Either that or the problems that they've caused have been so substantial that when I see them, they immediately stick out in my mind as something that must be destroyed. First off, they're made with cheap hardware. I mean, you can pick up one of these guys for $10, $20. They break all the time. The smallest amount of impact that they have is the additional points of failure that they have in the employee space, meaning you're left roaming around different spaces. Hey, the printer is down in copy room 5, and you have to go in there and you're digging under a shelf where you find one of these things stuffed underneath it. And it's either unplugged, which is probably most of the time somebody just accidentally unplugged the device or plugged in a laminating machine or something and had to pull one of the plugs, and that one looked just as good. So it causes an outage. It causes you to have to make a trip to that center. It causes IT resource, operating expense to increase. Anything like this that you put into a user space is going to get shoved into a corner and neglected, and nobody even remembers what that giant brick on the power supply is. I am convinced that the people who created these things designed them to cause network chaos, meaning when they go bad, they go into spaz mode. It's bad enough if they just die, but some of them will just start spewing tons of network traffic, like something goes berserk in them, and all of a sudden all of your communication around the network just slows down, or you get errors showing up on ports and ports disabling themselves on your real switches because they see all of these errors coming in. It's also a simple way for network loops to occur. I call that spanning tree protocol breakdown. Here's what happens, and this has happened to me at least 5 times at different locations that I've been over the years, where you've got your core switch, and this is the big switch in the network, and you've got all the cables running out of the switch to all the computers and all that, right? Well, one of those cables runs to that cubicle where somebody puts this little switch in the corner there and plugs in their computer and whatever other device. Well, maybe that other device is the laptop. You know, they just want a great network connection instead of using wireless, so they plug it in the laptop. They go home at night, and I've seen it happen to where the janitorial staff or somebody who thinks they're helpful actually takes that cable and just plugs it in here because there's an extra cable on the desk. They want it to look good, and of course it fits right in that network switch. Well, you just caused a loop in the network that spanning tree can't stop. See, there's one switch in the spanning tree network, and I'm getting a little deeper than we need to, but it's known as the root bridge, and it never blocks any ports. It's the center of the network. If you connect one of these switches like this to the root bridge and loop a cable, you will take down the entire network. You'll just have this constant broadcast storm flowing through that cubicle until somebody identifies it, and the whole network just slows down. Now, it doesn't crash because that little switch in the cubicle is small enough that it can't spew enough broadcast storm traffic to take down the whole thing, but it can definitely slow things down. So all of a sudden, your network slows down, and it continues that way for what? Days? Weeks? Years? I've seen it happen where I've walked into a network where they're like, it just has never performed the way we think it should. And you do a little analysis and you find that little switch shoved under a desk somewhere that somebody forgot about long ago, causing a loop. So how do we get rid of those small switches? We run cable. These are pictures of wall jacks. These Keystone jacks support 2 ports, 4 ports, 6 ports, 8 ports. And if you've got a cubicle that needs more than 8 ports, then by golly, do something like this. Set up a small little enclosed cabinet and put some real switches in there that support spanning tree. Now, at the beginning of this nugget, I said that you will design switch connections and understand critical features in a small office environment. Here's how I'd like to prove it. Read through the following scenario, sketch a basic network diagram showing the switch connections that will accommodate the situation presented. Here's the scenario. Let's read through it together. You are consulting for a furniture repair shop in a leased office building complex. One of the leased suites acts as the storefront, which houses a few desktop workstations and relies heavily on mobile devices like tablets for salespeople walking around. Roughly 30 network ports are needed. The second suite acts as the warehouse and holds the Windows SQL database that stores all of the information of the furniture repair shop, Active Directory servers, and the workbenches where you have mini workstations, one check-in tablet per station where people doing work can check in. And the warehouse hosts the internet routers, which has a primary and backup connection. So think of two routers coming in. You've got your primary internet connection and your backup internet connection that feeds into switches that might be in place there. Roughly 100 network ports are needed in the warehouse. So sketch the network infrastructure on the floor plan, identifying where the switches should go and the cables that should be installed to connect them. Here's the floor plan of the furniture repair shop. Right here in the blue is the warehouse area. So this is where those 100 network drops are going to be needed. And over there in the upper right is the MDF. That's going to be where the two internet routers come in. You've got the redundant connections coming in there, and those connect to your switch or switches, however you decide to design this. Now up here is the showroom, a separate office suite. Notice we've got a little IDF there that will house the connections coming in from the showroom and maybe wireless and everything else. That's your job. I want you to design this network. What do I mean by that? Show how many switches are needed for this environment and where are they going to go? I want you to show the connections. No, you don't have to draw all 100 ports and 30 ports in the showroom. Just show the switch connections. Show maybe where a couple of the drops would be. But most importantly, show me how the switches are going to be connected. What switches are going to be connected to what? How many cables are you going to use? That's why I put these little boxes here. No, don't go drawing on your screen. This is just a sample of what I want you to do on your piece of paper. The last thing I want you to write in here is the technology. We talked about two key things in here, spanning tree protocol and lag ports. Are you planning to use either of those features? Where would you put them? At this point, I would really say give a quick yes or no, because we haven't really gone into the depth of either of these technologies. You just know what they are. So will you use them? And the big question is why? What will those features do for you in this environment once you've sketched out the connections between the switches? And I have a surprise for you. I'm not going to give you the answer. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to Twitter. If you don't have an account, sign up for one. And I want you to make a digital copy of your design. I don't care if you hand draw it and scan it or take a picture of it with your cell phone or if you do something in PowerPoint. However you do it, I want you to show how many switches you've got, how they're connected, what technology you're using between them, and type out why. Why are you using that technology? Then come on over to Twitter. This is what Twitter looks like for you non-Twitter folks. And come into this what is happening section, and I want you to put at CBT Nuggets. That's them right there. And if you want to include me, there's my little handle at Chara Jeremy. That's fine. And I want you to paste in. Here's a little ad photo or video. You can do it straight from your cell phone or whatever you want to do. I'll just grab this image right here, which is a beautiful picture of a rack. And I'll include myself. And as a comment, just put IT expertise, small office switch design. Just like that. So we know what it is. And tweet away like that. Now, I'm not saying you're going to get a free consultation out of this, but I'll probably see it, and potentially tens of thousands of other people would too. And somewhere between us all, one of us should give you a thumbs up, yeah, you're going in the right direction, or you might tweak this, or have you thought about doing it this way, and get you on the right track. For now, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.